Go forward. Low zero. Go forward. Keep holding the tail for above him. Neck left away. Gosh back. Go forward. Yes. Go forward. Go forward. Yeah, thank you. Yoshi, so young today, so no matter that, no matter to the steel head, that's what get close. You have to go there, so down. More than coffee, that's like Roby Lois or Stashi everything, maybe we're close to that lady. Nafshi Shobay, Yankani Vimagli, Tzedek, Kuman Shmo, Gam Kelech, Gate Salmava, Slowy Rarot, Yatoy Madi, Shibdakomi, Shantepa, Himina Hamumi, Harok, Konai, Shulfan, Negaton Roy, Ishanta Vashemin Roshi, Kosira Vayab, Tobokesik, Tukuni, Koime Hayoy, Shafti Bivesa Dunai, Lioreth Yamim. Much is made in this week's Parsha of Eliezer's search to find the appropriate spouse for Yitzchak, and the fact that he was so focused on finding a balas chesed, a person who would conduct herself with kindness. And there's much discussion about the value of kindness within the Jewish people, and that, of course, is all true. But I think there's another lesson here, which is Eliezer was looking for midos. Eliezer was looking for character. The person can kick himself with the appropriate character, everything else seems to fall into place. So it's interesting what character specifically he thought was most important. But character says so much about a person. And I think if we just reflect for a few moments on Mr. Sid Meyers, Yoshua Yitzchak ben Yisrael, at least for myself, the thing that comes most strongly into my mind is just the beautiful individual he was and the beautiful midos with which he carried himself. I actually had the opportunity many times over the years to learn Torah with Mr. Meyers. I gave various shiurim over the years that Mr. Meyers attended, whether it be the Wednesday morning shiur that Mr. and Mrs. Meyers would come to in person for many years. And once we went on to Zoom with COVID, for a long, long time, they were on it on Zoom together. Whether it be years ago, I used to occasionally give Shabbos afternoon shiurim at University Boulevard, and Mr. Meyers was a regular. I was always struck that Mr. Meyers was clearly a very intelligent person. But what struck me more was when he had something to say, when he had a question to share, the dignity with which he shared it. I'm sure Mrs. Myers won't remember, but in this Wednesday morning shiur, there was a certain recurring question that Mr. Myers had. There's a certain thing that was of great interest to him in various svarim of Navi as we learned it. And each time he asked the question, and I don't think I ever gave him an answer that he actually agreed with. And I basically gave him the same answer. And what normally happens with people who come to a shiur over years and they don't like the answer they've received to the question is they normally make very clear, your answer's not good, give me something else. But that was never the case with Mr. Myers. It was bothering him. He was thinking about it. He asked it as if it had never come up before. I would give the answer and he would reflect on it for a moment and then we'd go on. And I could still see in his eyes he actually didn't like the answer, but it didn't matter. There was a certain character there, a certain dignity there. But my strongest memory of Mr. Myers is what ostensibly is a very simple thing, but it really never ceased to amaze me. In not the very last years, but let's say the years before these last years, I would marvel seeing him walk the shul. When Minyanim stopped University Boulevard, there was a period, if I remember correctly, he was still walking from the house near the University Boulevard shul to Arcola, I believe so. Yeah. And certainly once the Myers moved into their apartment in University Towers, I remember just watching him walk. And it was obvious that it was a very difficult thing for him to do. It was just obvious, just looking at him. And I remember thinking to myself, there's no negativity on the face, no complaining on the face. He's just doing what he has to do. And I remember thinking to myself, I wish every person walking to shul on Shabbos could just stop and see this man walking to shul. The attitude with which he came to shul, the attitude with which he was in shul for davening. And if we could all live our lives that way, just a little bit more, whether it be in how we interact with God, whether it be in how we deal with life's challenges, we'd certainly be better people. There's a lot of discussion as to the way the Torah refers to the age of Sarah at the beginning of this week's parsha. 100 years, 20 years, 7 years, and it's a famous medrash that next the different milestones in Sarah's life. But the Kli Yakar stops on a more basic point. It says Me'ah Shana, Esrim Shana, Sheva Shanim. It doesn't say Sheva Shana, it says Sheva Shanim. With the form of year, it's different. One of the ideas that the Kli Yakar says is that at the end of one's life, things do become much more difficult. And for the last 7 years, the years are referred to in a different way. They're referred to as Shanim, not Shana, because it was very difficult for Sarah. That obviously was the case for Mr. Myers in various aspects. And I just want to say, if we're going to talk about lessons learned, I think any of us who had the good fortune to interact with the Myers over these more recent years learned many lessons from Mrs. Myers regarding devotion and regarding care. And with Hashem's help, his neshama should have so much nachas from the beautiful mishpacha he and his wife built together. And his neshama should have much continued nachas from the various people, related or not, who he touched in his life. That's really the truth.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Abba, Yeshua, Yitzhak, and Israel, known as Sid Meyers. Ve'aish Moshe anav ma'od mikol ha'adam asher al pnei ha'adama. Now Moses himself, was very humble, more so than any other human being on the earth. You'll have to excuse me. What I'm about to do, it's a little bit unusual. I'm about to superimpose one hesped on top of another. So when my mother called me and told me what had happened, I understood that it would be appropriate to say something, and that was the first pasuk that I thought of. And basically, I was up all night last night wordsmithing and trying to get it right. And it wasn't until about 5 o'clock this morning that I realized I kept feeling like something was missing. And then I finally realized what it was. I was very focused on Anav, which was the hesped, and we will talk about. But I realized that I think the pasuk is telling us there's two aspects about Moshe. There's Anav, of course, but there's also the Haish, which is kind of an extra word here. I think it's telling us that you have to have a certain kind of balance between the humility, the anavut, and your overall character, and standing up and being a person, being a man, and dignity, and carrying yourself in a certain way. What the Rebbe was talking about. I'd like to talk a little bit about. Thank you for sharing about my father's interaction with the community, and I'd like to talk a little bit about his connection with the family. My father loved his family and loved family gatherings, but I think the thought that everyone here today would drop what they're doing and take the last train to Clarksburg, Maryland, just for his sake. I don't know that would sit well with him, but here we are. So in Bamidbar, Parakeh Bet Pasuk Gimel, the Torah teaches us. So I'll just repeat it. Ve'aish Moshe anav me'od mikol ha'adam asher al pnei ha'adama. Now Moshe himself was very humble, more so than any other human being on earth. None of us lived in the times of Moshe Rabbeinu, none of us here, but we live in the times of my father, the kid Zadie, my mother's husband, Mr. Sid Meyers. What does it mean to be a person of humility? I speak not from personal experience, but from observing how my father conducted himself. For Zadie, it means kindness, concern for others, putting your interests after other people's, and not always getting what you want. It meant picking his battles, not having the last word. Yes, it also meant there was no glory, maybe sometimes getting the short end of the stick, to be honest. He did not have an easy life. But at the end of the day, my father could hold his head high. Were he to choose to, which he would not, but he could, because he lived with humility, dignity, truth, and refined character. I also want to acknowledge my mother, Ima, who for 55 years was my father's full partner in their every endeavor. In recent years, she has stood by him to face every challenge, serving as his caregiver, knowing that no one else would be good enough. Abba, I thought we had a little more time. Not endless time, but I thought we had a little more. Time is so essential, and yet it's so fleeting. I've learned so much from you and the example that you set in the life you live, and even in your passing, you're teaching me and all of us a lesson about the value of time and the need to use it wisely. I could not have asked for a better father, a role model, a dugma yeshit. Even though you like to sit in the back row and mind your own business, you cast a long shadow and you leave big shoes to fill. I hope that I have been at least half the father for my kids that you were for me and Jess. To paraphrase Dan Fogelberg, my life has been a poor attempt to imitate the man. I'm just a living legacy to my hero, my dad. Our prophet Ezekiel, shared the following vision. V'ish ki yet tzadik v'asa mishpat u'tzedakah. Thus, if a certain man is righteous and does what is just and right, he follows this with some examples of what this righteous man would have done and would not have done. In summary, he then says, B'chukotai yihalech mishpatai shamar lasot emet, tzadik hu chayo yichya nu'um Hashem Elokim. If he has followed God's laws and kept God's rules and acted honestly, he is righteous. Such a person shall live, declares the Lord God. This is a pretty good description of my father. He followed God's laws, kept God's rules, and acted honestly. Does he yet live? I believe yes, in some fashion. The prophet goes on to teach, among other things, that it is incumbent on the children to imitate the good deeds of their father. As his neshama now returns to its source, I hope that Zadie's lessons remain here on earth for us to continue to cherish and emulate and enrich our existence. This extends to his dozens of Yosei Chalatzav, Ki et asher yeshno po imanu hayom, umeid hayom, as well as et asher inanu po imanu hayom. Meyers and Strauss, grandchildren and great-grandchildren, Zadie was always so proud of you, and in his eyes, you could do no wrong. Follow me in choosing to apply your energies to living the lessons that Zadie taught by his actions, his choices, and his steadfast commitment to doing the right thing. Abba, I beg your mechila and forgiveness for every moment that I caused you grief or concern or any kind of upset. You have always meant so very much to me, and I'm going to miss you very much.
You could feel stuck. First of all, we thank all the people that come here. Such a beautiful tzibur. All to show kavod. My father. He once asked a question for a leading Rosh Yeshiva.
sorry, the other way. The leading Rosh Yeshiva once started asking questions to some Bachrim. Who's your grandparents? Who do you come from? What's your yichus? Who are they? And a lot of Bachrim would answer, and they would say, your grandfather wasn't a great Talmid Chacham, but he was a Shomer Shabbos. And every single Bacher would give the same answer. My grandfather wasn't a great Talmid Chacham, but he was a Shomer Shabbos. And the Rosh Yeshiva understood exactly. Somebody who's a Shomer Shabbos, difficult times, of course, his grandchildren are going to be Talmidei Chacham. My father-in-law was not just a Shomer Shabbos in difficult times. He was many, many more things. Gemara says, Shabbos, what should a person do? He wants to have children who are Talmidei Chachamim. He wants to have sons-in-laws, Talmidei Chachamim. One of the main things that the Gemara mentions there is that he should show kavod to Talmidei Chachamim. If he shows honor and respect to Talmidei Chachamim, he will have very good offspring. You should know, my father-in-law showed kavod, dignity to everyone. It was part and parcel of his very nature and his very being. And I must say, I felt very comfortable being your son-in-law. You always treated me with such respect. Where does all of that come from? Where does that come from? That you could show everyone such respect. Where does that come from? It comes from what unbelievable midos was mentioned before. What incredible midos. What beautiful character. Such a person, what a gentleman. The Shalom Bayis that we observed. The Shalom Bayis that we watched and that we were able to learn from for so many years. How much is that worth? More than anything, to observe, living example. And eventually, when it came down to it, in the end, my mother-in-law, the Mesiras Nefesh, that my mother-in-law had to do to take care of my father-in-law, it's unbelievable. How does a person have a shalom bayis? How can he be such a gentleman? So another the anivus that Oren mentioned, another is a very, very big part of this. Humility. And it's a humility which comes not because you don't. My father-in-law was such a chess player. He could, and he was good. You know, they say the way that you play chess is the way you live your life. You know, he was very cautious. He was very cautious in how he played, and he played. You couldn't find a way. He was somebody who could have, who could have made a big deal over himself. He could have made a big deal over himself. He had what to show for himself. But nothing. There wasn't a trace of that. There wasn't a trace of that. There was only the dignity and the kavod and the dignity for everyone that Oren mentioned, but total humility, not demanding any honor from anyone. He has Baruch Hashem, that the family, the beautiful, the Meyers family, the Strauss family, we all owe, we owe so much to Abba, to Zaidi, both for the example that he showed us and for the actual generosity to us that he showed. We owe him. He would sit in the back of the shul. He would sit in the back of the shul. He demanded no covet whatsoever. Nothing. He was just always there. Always there. Always doing the right thing. I once said, having a schmooze with him. He was talking about, I said, I always paid my tuition, I always paid my tuition for my children, I always made sure to pay, He was just doing the right thing without asking any covet for it. That's such a lesson. It's such a lesson for us. It's a lesson. And that's what causes a person to be able to show covet to everybody else. If he's not too much involved in himself, and in his own covets, and then he can, so then he can act in a beautiful way with everyone else. We're going to miss you very much. You have a tremendous olam haba in store for you. The entire families that you built. Yes, that you built, and that you wouldn't take any credit for yourself for what you did. But when I said that itself, the fact that you don't take any credit for it is that's also part of it. But you have tremendous credit in it. And you have a tremendous olam haba in store for you. We hope that you will be arriving there very soon. We are going to miss you very much. You're a beautiful person. Be with in this world. Anyone else like to say something? This morning, taking my son, 5-year-old son, Peter, school, and explaining to him, comes home from school, I'm not going to be the one to pick him up from the bus. I'm going to Silverstone, I'm going to Levi, So 5-year-old to explain to him, what does it mean? What does it mean when somebody passes away? I doesn't understand the concept. So I started telling him, and I realized it's just that's what Zaidi is. The person who leaves this world, the person comes to Shemayim, and everything a person does, a person's rewarded for. A person's rewarded for their tefillah, as mentioned before. A person's rewarded for their Torah. A person's rewarded for their chesed, for their good midas. Everything a person does, a person is rewarded for. And not only every action a person does, but the way everyone does, every action was done makes such a big difference. The effort that a person puts into every action that a person does, whether it's going to shul, as I mentioned earlier, it wasn't so easy, or was holding his own, even if whatever other influences there may be. I want to share a memory I have. A memory, very interesting thing I heard from Zaidi years ago. I believe before Bar Mitzvah, I was davening at the shul. I was davening in Shem Ramuna, and it comes time for Kriyas HaTorah.
So, turn the siddur, it was in the weekday, turn the siddur to the back of the siddur, and, Kriyas Torah is in the back of the siddur, turn the siddur to the back. Take a look, okay, there it goes, there's Kriyas Torah, okay. So Zaidi tells me, Zaidi says, my grandchild should be able to turn the siddur and find Kriyas Torah. That's not something I take for granted. To say Zaidi was somebody that he understood that not everyone in his situation, not everyone he grew up with, can necessarily say. He told me I wouldn't have been able to say, I can't say that, this is something I could take for granted, that my grandchild, could turn to the back of the siddur and find Kriyas Torah. That's not something he took for granted. This is something, and now, Baruch Hashem, we can say, Zaidi, every one of your grandchildren can turn to the back of the siddur. They can find Kriyas Torah. You have grandchildren, everyone, and each and every one in their own way, in their own place. They can learn Chumash, they can learn Mishnayos, they can learn Gemara. We have the grandchildren. We have Bali Tefillah from the Meyers side. They're very, they can do far and beyond that. So I was thinking, what is it? Zaidi did say, this is something he didn't take for granted. So it's something he didn't take for granted. That means that he's saying that, the way he was, where it comes from, the way he was brought up, it didn't necessarily have to be like this. So what did bring it? What did make this happen? Of course, hard to say. We know everything. But one point we can definitely say for sure, and this is clear. The fact, I don't know if it was, I'm sure, years and years ago, when Zaidi and grandmother, moved to Silver Spring, they didn't grow up in Silver Spring, not like either of them were born here. Zaidi, Granton, grandmother, Chicago. They made the choice, Zaidi, I don't know exactly what Zaidi was doing, right in the very beginning. When he moved to Silver Spring, I presume, different things from Washington. And I'm sure, there was a choice, they could have moved to one place, they could have moved to a different place, different places. And they made the choice to move to Silver Spring. And that in and of itself, I think is something which one can definitely say made such a tremendous difference. Silver Spring place, a place we had the Rav, Rabbi Einamer, Olav Shalom, and Havim Chaim Rosenbaum, and all the other people over here, everyone, the community leaders, the people you would call, maybe somebody would refer to them as simple people. They're not simple people. These are people of great values, and they connected themselves to Silver Spring. They really did. They felt that in every way they were full-fledged, members of the shul, not just, they paid their membership, they did pay their membership, but it wasn't just a matter of paying membership. They totally consider themselves to be a part of the community. The Rambam teaches us that the derech of a person is that a person is affected and a person is influenced by his surroundings. The Rambam says if a person, therefore the Rambam says it's such an important thing for a person to always connect himself to good people in order to learn from their ways. It's something that's obvious and something that's clear that by Zaidi and grandmother living in Silver Spring, and not just happen to happen that's the place, that's the address, that they happen to live in, but being a real part of the community definitely made such a big impression on them and on their children, on Uncle Warren, my mother. That definitely is something that definitely had a tremendous effect on their children and us, their grandchildren. Definitely something which all of us, as Zaidi said, this is not something we can take for granted, and we have to believe that that's definitely true. This is not something we can take for granted. Definitely say that definitely a large part of this came from the fact from Zaidi's and grandmother, from their total being a part of this community in every way. we got to see so much, grandmother's devotion because they such a special way. Grandmother's devotion and my mother's language, her devotion, Uncle Warren's devotion. They would do everything. We'd have my mother, Uncle Warren, under the drop of a hat, would come, fly out to Silver Spring, whatever it is, be hours and hours away, do everything for Zadie. This is all mitas. These are things he learns from Zadie. What can we do? What can we do? Zadie's not going to be with us. What can we do? And the truth is, as mentioned earlier, that now we can continue to honor Zadie, maybe in a certain sense, even more than we were able to do previously during his lifetime. Many of us lived, I live in Lakewood, New Jersey, more than 3 hours away. Many of us, children, grandchildren, lived even further than that. We weren't so close. It wasn't so easy for us, to come and visit. It wasn't so simple for us to deserve it, to give Zadie the honor that he really did deserve. And I asked on behalf of the children, all the grandchildren, that Zadie be meichel us for everything we did and everything we didn't do, everything we should have done. But that's, and of course we know that Zadie will be meichel us because Zadie was somebody who really cared about us. But now, one thing is very important for us to know, that now, in a certain sense, we can give Zadie honor and respect, even in a greater sense than we were able to do in his lifetime. We can do mitzvahs l'ilui nishmasai. We can, even and mitzvahs could mean, doing extra things, but that's not all that it means. Mitzvahs means even improving what we do already. We learn Torah, we do mitzvahs, we do chesed, we do good things for other people. We can do it a drop better, to do it a little bit better. As a schus for Zadie, and we can do that, and by doing that, we are truly honoring Zadie. Zadie was a man in this world. It was very hard to honor Zadie. How do you honor Zadie? I mean, sits in the back, he doesn't ask for anything, not looking for any kind of honor. But now, Zadie's not with us. Now, when Zadie goes to Shemayim, we can truly honor him. We totally could. And Zadie does appreciate it. Zadie definitely does. Everything we do, the Ilin Ishmasa, it's an honor for Zadie. And it's our way that we can connect to Zadie. And we can say that Zadie is not just somebody who is a man of the past, but he's somebody of the present and he's somebody of the future. We can continue to learn from Zadie. We can continue to go in his path and to think about, that everything that Zadie stood for and everything that Zadie represented. We asked Zadie, this time Zadie be a male Tziyosher. Zadie come to the Kitzah HaKavod. Zadie asked for us, for his children, for his grandchildren, for his great-grandchildren, and for the entire Silver Spring community, for all Jews wherever they are, especially in Israel. And the situation is not so simple. He asked that Zadie come to Hashem, and he asked that Yidden should be saved and they should have atzlacha in all ways, and everything should work well for all Yidden. They should have only good in their life. And we asked for them, and we asked that Zadie should ask Hashem that we should be zeichet and makabel Mashiach Tzidkenu and hear of Yameinu. Amen. Tefillah Amav Sanetzach Mach Hashem the kingdom now.
I probably spent more of school with Sid when he alive. And that way I understood probably better than most of you. But I'll give you the shortest elevator speech possible right now. Everything that was said about Sid today, we spoke of many times. It's very straight to it. But basically for the grandchildren, with the ones who left out, it was also good on the serving on. We just in a difficult situation. We worked with 30 some others with the Navy. We considered them very major development for the Navy. I just mentioned one of them. We were very young. We were right here in the neighborhood, and they were working on the Aegis weapon system. And they did the final test with it. And if you see all the sales going on in Israel, they all started the farm. Even though finish it, the initial food they took them to the dawn, they come from Torah, shipped them in the car. We were very much involved in it. And we were heard enough for him today. And you know, we worked with him for many hours. It's all absolutely thing. And the last thing we left out is for 30 years, I think, maybe more or less, Rabbi, he helped me set up the shul for every occasion, every holiday, all the numbers, and he always provided with education. They never made a mistake. And I thank you personally much for that, because otherwise, that would have been done. Thank you.
Anyone else? Please rise for the Kamala. It's difficult. Yamole Rakamim, Shokain, Bamaromim, I'm saying Menuchono, Al Kanpe, Ashkina, the Malos Kadoshim Motorim, Gizora, Kiamasi Rimas, Nishmas, Joshua Yitzhak Ben Yisrael, Sholach, the Olamo, Babur Shanak, Spalalim, Yaras Paras, Nishmaso, Ganei, Menuchaso, Came Balarakamim, Yaski Rehu, say Ser Knapav, the Olamim, Yitzror, B'Torah Chayimas Nishmaso, Adonai Yunak Laso, V'Yonuach, B'Shalom Al Mishkavo, V'Nomar, Amen.